Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review The Town, the dreaded Sundown. This, of course, is the 2014 version, because, of course, we have a remake on our hands here, whereas the original was done in the 1970s, somewhere around there. We not only have this be a remake movie, but then we also have this movie being based on true events from the 1946s, when we, of course, had the Moon Knight murders that were taking place in Texarkana. So, really, I would go on and normally in a thumbnail, I would probably look like the character upon the film. But I feel since this movie is based on true events, I thought that would actually be in very poor taste to go on and oh, I'm going to dress as this person. Nah, based on true events. No. So, going on into this film, I would really have to say that this movie does have a Friday the 13th kind of approach to itself. But I do like the way that this movie is shot. Here is the problem that I do have, though. Man, does it seem like this remake is trying to sell the original film to the point of us just wasting so much time to show somebody either watching the original movie or they're using scenes from the original film to kind of show how things are kind of similar, or we're just going on and just continuing to just kind of rehash the original movie to just try to sell it weirdly. I don't know why, but I thought at the early part of this film, the opening way of which that this movie approaches itself is interesting. But then kind of the further and further we get in this film, I like that this movie feels like it's really trying, it's really giving the best effort, because of course we have it in the original film. We have a movie that's based on true events that is to try and go in a comedic direction for some odd reason, and is to kind of do some kind of weird and goofy comedy things that is just to be what the is this? But anyways, but here's the oddball thing. This movie is to say that the setting of this film is taken in 2013, but we rarely have so much of the style of this film that is to try and say that it's oh no, this is to be in the 70s, even though it's an up. There's a cell phone and there's there is some technical to the time period kind of things, but I can't help but also just say it's man, so much about this is trying to recapture the original as far as it just trying to be a time period piece, but it's saying it's consistently in 2013, which I don't buy. You might as well should have just should have just said that this might have been the year after this film came out. That would make a lot more sense, to just kind of keep it bottled into the 70s, instead of just trying to have it be oh yeah, this is the 2013 version of this, which doesn't really make sense because clothes and a number of other kind of just problems and issues and whatever. But I would say to go on and check this movie out, because there's bits and pieces and parts and interesting things about it. Really, a lot of people possibly go on and watch the original and probably compare the two, because to me, from what I've kind of heard from the original, it feels the original and this one are kind of one and the same. And so when going on into this movie, I would just say hey, give this movie a try, and you can go on and watch the original if that's what you want to do. But without further ado, I think it's about that time to just go into that double five time territory. Let's just go into this thing called, spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time you can spoil this movie. So in the very beginning of this movie, we of course have them kind of telling us that, like, oh yeah, this movie's based on a true story that took place in 1946, and the Moonlight Murders, and they're explaining all like the whole backstory of the history, and that this took place in Texarkana, which of course hasn't drastically changed since, of course, the 70s, because hey, like, that's really cool that the setting like hasn't drastically changed all that much. So we we have in the very beginning of this film where we of course are showcasing the 70s film at a drive-in somewhere. I'm like, man, yeah, they're really they're really kind of like, they're saying this is 2013, but like people are going to the drive-in. Okay, like, I would understand that like now, today, in today's world, but not 19, not in like 2013. People would be going to a movie theater somewhere, because like, but I guess like you would have on a 70s movie be probably more than likely be being played on a drive-in than you probably would in a movie theater, because a lot of times uh, like we would have like movies being replopped out into a movie theater, like a Star Wars or Jurassic Park or something, to just try and get people back into the movie theater. But anyways, let's just push on. So we have our characters who are watching this movie in a drive-in, and so we have both Jamie and we have both Corey, that are of course going to this movie drive-in, and we consistently have Reverend Cartwright, that of course is kind of holding these banners all around, just saying like, hey, this is a godless movie, and like, you shouldn't be watching this. Hey, like, come to my church to kind of like confess and whatever, that you would watch this godless movie, and so on and so forth. So, you know what, if I was this drive-in guy, I would honestly just be like, you know what, Reverend, like, do you have a permit to be here? Or do you, like, is there some way where I can kind of just figure out a way to boot you out of here? Because you're kind of annoying the people that are watching this film, and more than likely they're like, I guess when really looking at it, it's like the guy's like, well, like, dude, they already paid for the money, so like, if the guy just kind of runs them out before the movie is done, and like, hey, I made my money either way. So we have both Jamie and we have both Corey kind of like on the car, and it seems that Jamie is kind of discomforted via this film, and so Corey's like, "Well, hey, like, do you want to just leave? Like, do you want to like go? Like, we don't have to see this movie if you don't want." And so Jamie's like, "Well, yeah, like, let's go." So both of them go to a location that I guess is Lover's Lane, or anyways. So we have these two that all of a sudden are to kiss, and then Corey is to kind of like touch Jamie's leg, and so all of a sudden we have Jamie who kind of stops, because all of a sudden she's seeing this guy who looks very familiar to the man that we kind of see in this picture here. We have this guy in the forest who's just kind of looking on. And Corey's like, "What? Oh, well, like I guess he just wanted to show." And then all of a sudden he disappears. So like, well, like, do you want to leave, or do you want to like kind of kiss some more? So all of a sudden this guy comes in and is to the Phantom is to come in and whip out his gun and tell Corey to get out of his car or he's going to shoot Jamie. So Corey comes out of the car and Jamie is to come out of the car. And so the Phantom goes and is to tell Corey to drop his pants. And I was like, okay, what kind of weird, goofy stuff is going to happen here? And so the Phantom tells Corey, or as they weirdly call a certain character in this film, Sackhead? I thought they called him the Phantom in this movie. It is what it is. So, either Sackhead or the Phantom. We have this character, Corey, that is now laying down on the ground because the Phantom wanted him to. And so Jamie is supposed to turn around where she can't see what's going on. And so the Phantom is just stabbing into Corey as the Phantom is kind of sitting on top of Corey, stabbing into his back, supposedly. And Jamie goes on and she is to go and see what's going on. And the Phantom's like, oh, you looked. And so Jamie is now booking it into the forest, as well as the Phantom is kind of shortly there behind her. Yeah. So we have the Phantom going on and finding Jamie within this forest. And so he gets on top of her and he says, remember Mary. And then he leaves. To leave Jamie, now kind of covered in blood, at this drive-in, and all of a sudden everybody's putting on their high beams after they went on and they booed the projector for not having a part of the film ready. So Jamie's kind of crawling back to this drive-in for people to all of a sudden have their high beams and like, hey, let's get her out of here, let's get her to a hospital. And so now we have the police officers that are going on and kind of questioning Jamie, of course. And honestly, like, it feels like the police officers in this movie are doing absolutely nothing. And really, I get it, because at this point, like, no horror movie really gives a about the police officer side of things or the cop side of things. Like, they really just want to go on and they want to focus so much so on one rando character that they just want to, like, build and, like, just kind of have, like, oh yeah, like, I guess the police should be doing something, but So, like, that's the sad thing about this film. I'm just trying to be as honest as possible. And I get that this movie is to have a reflection upon true events, and I apologize if anybody is to be the descendants of whatever this story was, especially if any number of these people were to somehow to actually be connected for whatever this story was. So we go on and we have Jamie, who is to decide that that she really wants to be involved in this case somehow, because we also have Jamie that's getting this phone call from Corey, who is supposedly dead, and it's the Phantom calling her and is kind of giving like his message to Jamie to deliver to this police officer, who of course is Deputy Foster. So, and we also have it where it seems that Jamie is to also get this email. And I'm just like, man, like, this guy just really has a lot to just say. Like, he's not just going to go on and kill people. No. Like, he has to go on and really just have, like, I gotta tell you something. Like, that's what I didn't really understand about, like, because I understand, like, the Zodiac Killer, which is kind of like a real uh, quick comparison that I think a lot of people would do for this story. We go on and we have a character that is to be like the Zodiac Killer that sends like messages to the uh, like the newspaper, and like they kind of like figure out and like decipher all these, and they're trying to go on and solve this case and whatever. And so like we have it where like these guys take these messages and they do like nothing with it, because like we just have a whole entire movie where these officers just don't do a lick of any investigation. Like, they're just hoping that this killer is going to somehow just surprisingly show up, because that's all they can really do. And they're just kind of setting up a curfew, because, like, the killer is to, of course, attack people far too randomly, and there's really nothing they can do. So, we go on and we have Jamie, who is going and trying to go to a library place to kind of do some research, to try to figure out more about the Phantom. And so the Phantom goes on and he is to attack another couple who, of course, are to be both uh, Danny and Kendra. We, of course, have Danny that is to come home from the military and is to come home to immediately uh, go on with his wife and just be banging away upon this hotel. So after their session, we of course have Kendra that's telling Danny like, "Hey, can you go and you uh, get me some candy and so on and so forth." And so as Danny is to go on to go outside, we have Kendra that all of a sudden is to kind of make her way through this window, to all of a sudden have this head come flying through this window, and of course it's Danny's. So Kendra is to try and scramble from out of this window, and she falls out of this window and breaks her leg. We see the bone popping out. I'm like, oh my god. And so Kendra is trying to hobble her way to her car, and Kendra is trying to drive her car with one broken leg. And so the Phantom ends up coming into this woman's car and starts stabbing into her and kills her. And I'm like, oh my god. Like, this is a pretty good scene. Like, every one of the kills in this movie is actually pretty good. But the story is just kind of like, it's a slow to a crawl build of a thing. But hey, like, they had to figure out some way to relate the other or connect the other film in this movie, and just kind of like figure out a way to kind of have like certain town events and stuff like that. So there's only so much you can kind of technically do for this film. But like, you could say that at least this film is to like seem to be doing things that seem better than its possible original. Anyways, so we have Jamie that goes on and is to go and start investigating, and is to start to look at the Phantom's kind of history. And then she goes on and meets with a guy named Nick to try and find if there's more things that she could find. And Nick's like, oh, like, you need to go to the jail, because it seems that when the jail was to eventually be repurposed to just have these archive like things of paper between the 40s and 50s, I'm assuming, we had Jamie that's going on, and she's like looking through all this place, and she's like, oh my god, like I seriously have to go on and like go through all of this stuff to try to figure out like about the Phantom. And then so Jamie starts thumbing through some things, but then Nick just goes on. It's like, well, hey, here's like the greatest hits of all the Phantom stuff. And I'm just like, why not just give her that right out of the gate? Why is she like thumbing through all this research for you to just go on and be like, oh, here's what all you need to just see is right here? Really? So Jamie is to start thumbing through this research, and so after Jamie is to go on and get this email and is to get this phone call, Jamie goes on and is to bring this up to the police, who of course are to now have this Texas Ranger who is called Lone Wolf, who's like, well, hey, like I'm sure that you guys don't like the fact that of course you have a Texas Ranger that kind of plops in your place. Like I've had one time or another where a Texas Ranger would plop into my place, and I would just be kind of uneasy about all that, and so all of a sudden we have Lone Wolf, who just calls himself Lone Wolf, is to be having a nickname for a person, and he calls him Sparkplug. And then immediately after that, we have Lone Wolf that says, like, well, hey, I guess the one thing that I really need to go on and do is watch the original The Town That Dreaded Sundown movie, because like I have never had the pleasure of seeing it. Pleasure? Okay, that seems like a weird word. But yeah, we have Lone Wolf, who is to call a guy named Sparkplug, a nickname Sparkplug, and just like, and he never saw the film. You would have thought the guy would have seen the film already, because maybe he had like Netflix or something like that, because it's 2013. Like, where do they have to like drudge up this movie from? Like, you would think it'd probably be on some streaming device somewhere, because it's 2013. This is like what? Like, this is 8 years ago, which, yeah, like, streaming would be available somewhere. But whatever. So after Lone Wolf is to start to watch this movie, he's like, man, like, so it seems like the killer is trying to recreate every scene from this movie. And so, which I think is kind of a fascinating approach to kind of a horror film. And I wish there was a lot more like that, because we may have like a Scream movie that's like that, but still. So Lone Wolf is trying to figure out how to, like, what is going to be the next scene that they're going to try, that the Phantom is going to try to recreate. And I guess it's some barn scene, and he's just like, yeah, there's no way for us to track down in time what exact barn scene is going to be involved in his next kill. So we go on, and we have Jamie, that of course is to get with a guy named Nick, who has gone on and had classes with her before at school. And Nick is going on and really pressing on Jamie, just like, well, yeah, like, I think there was a time when, like, I kind of asked about you in school, and, like, it's a lot of cliches, like, hey, this guy's really wanting to try and win this girl over, and he's trying to say that, like, he really was interested in her, and it's a lot of that. So when we get it to where both Jamie and Nick are in this car, Nick tries to make a move on Jamie, and Jamie's like, "Why did you do that?" And so, like, Jamie pushes Nick out of this car for him to just kind of walk home, and then Jamie feels bad about it later, and Nick is to go on and be like, "Well, like, hey, like, I'm sorry about what I did." And, like, I didn't, like, I was kind of, I thought there was a sign there. I think, like we were holding hands before, because Nick was going and wanting Jamie to go to this like candlelight visual uh, with the town that's going on, and trying to remember both Corey and remember the two other people that had gotten killed, which I already mentioned before, both Danny and Kendra. And so, because Jamie had already went to Corey's funeral, and we have like Corey's mother that's calling uh like Jamie like a hoe and this and that, and she's like, "Oh my god, you like how could you?" It's like, what? So like all of a sudden, like Jamie and Corey just kissing or having some love making session, like that was the one thing where the Phantom's like, I gotta I gotta kill these people for this. Really? Like, and why is it that this girl is like, this mother must just be calling this girl any name under the sun and just accusing Jamie because she's the only one left alive about this whole event. And I just don't get it. Like I like you like I don't get how this woman is just blaming this woman Jamie for the death of her son, because I guess she has no, she can't blame the Phantom, who is actually the killer. But anyways, so you would have thought like we would have had uh Corey's mom that was like basically being like the mom from Jaws, where she's going on and telling the sheriff like, "Hey, like get somebody on this case." Like you would have thought like Corey's mom would have been pressing to try to get this thing solved, so this Phantom person would be going on and seeking justice. But it seems like, I guess, Corey's mom doesn't even give a about like the police force going on and wanting to get this solved. It's like, it just, I don't know. It's just like there's so much about this where there's a better way to write this story. Um, but hey, movies and shows are tough to write, and plus also there's probably a ton of rough drafts that were to probably go through this movie to be done. And so hey, movies are tough. And plus, also, if I'm to say, like, oh, I think I can easily write this movie, when it really comes down to it, like, I would probably have difficulties, like, trying to redo this film, because I would go on to be like, I want to create something completely different than. And a lot of people are like, no, I want certain scenes, and, like, let's do that trombone thing again. Weirdly. So yeah, so they go to this candlelight visual, and what ends up happening is it seems that there's somebody dressed as the Phantom that arrives there. And so we have one of the police officers that goes and shoots this Phantom guy, or this Phantom person, and kills them, to find out that it's some woman, and she is to be wearing this costume. And I'm like, well, there's one thing that the police officers actually do in this film, is kill that woman, sadly enough. Because it's kind of a very distasteful thing to just be wearing that costume in this area. I don't know what that woman was thinking. Or maybe that she was possibly drugged and had no clue what she was thinking. So we have it where it seems, after that whole email thing, we have both Lone Wolf and the chief that are to possibly think that Reverend Cartwright is to be somehow linked to these murders, and that Reverend Cartwright could possibly be the Phantom. Because it seems like this guy has everything to gain from this event happening. Because even Reverend Cartwright is to go on and mention, it's like, well, yeah, like, there's a lot of people that are going on into my church and are trying to confess their sins and are trying to hope that they can be saved because of this whole event happening. And it's like, dude, you just gave yourself motive right there. Like, we can just go on and book him, Daniel, right now. Like, let's see if this guy, let's kind of put him over, let's get him arrested and see if, like, the Phantom keeps killing, and then I'm like, maybe it's not him. But, like, yeah, like, he has all the motive in the world. And plus, also, this guy, like, didn't like the original movie, and he's trying to go on and consistently, like, have people, like, stop watching it and stop going to see it every year. And so, like, this is to, like, we have all the makings of, like, a guy who should have been, like, guy numero uno for this case, like, is just to, like, oh, well, I just don't think that he's the guy. Like, I think there's somebody else that's involved here, because technically there is. So, let's go into this. So, we consistently have Jamie, that is to be watched over by Deputy Foster. She's kind of consistently being followed around by him. And so I'm like, well, how is this going to go horribly awry? We're probably going to just see, like, Jamie's going to be leaving one night to go somewhere, and Deputy Forrest is, like, dead in his car. Ugh! Like, I was expecting that to happen at some point. So, we have Reverend who is the Reverend who is going on to this other event, because I'm like, man, for these people to have like a murder on the loose, man, are they going on and doing so many public events? Like, as if they're, like, just saying, like, well, like, everything should go on as normal. Like, no, freaking cancel all these events. Just stay inside, stay at home. Like, they go on and they say on the radio and whatever. Because, again, this is 2013, but I guess people are probably relying on the radio because this is technically a 70s freaking film, and they just don't want to admit to that. So, we have this event where, like, there's these people going on and playing this band. This band is playing, and everybody in town is kind of going on and doing this little get-together. And so all of a sudden, these band members are kind of making their way home. These two men are in this car, and so all of a sudden they kind of stop at this place that has all these big, massive signs, and it's kind of a visually interesting place. Bravo to the people that either came up with this or kind of found this place, and they're just like, man, this place is a gold mine visually. So we have these two characters, and so both of these guys are just like, you know what, like, I'm kind of hard. And so, like, one person is kind of making the suggestion. It's like, well, like, you know what, you can go on and you can, like, suck it if you want. And so all of a sudden we have the Phantom, who is to kind of break up what, of course, to be another kind of session of sorts. And so we, of course, have one of the guys who, of course, to be Johnny, who runs off, and Roy is kind of stuck in the car, and so Johnny is bolting it, and so the Phantom is to go on and have this now silencer gun, and he shoots Johnny and murders him, and Roy, of course, is to be caught. And now we have it where, of course, the Phantom is to go on and take this trombone and consistently stab into Roy and kind of play this burr, 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 burr. And I'm like, I'm sorry, for anybody who's to be a trombone player, like, I just, I tried to just play a trombone at one point, just for fun, and I was like, you know what? You don't even need to like forcibly like adjust this thing to be able to play a trombone. And so like the whole stabbing part of this thing is to just like, it's an interesting scene. I like it. But I'm just like, you don't even need to have like the burr, burr thing going on to have this part of this instrument to move and what. So it's just like, it's an interesting thing to do for a film. But you also, if you're a person that knows the instrument or is familiar with it, you're like what? You're just kind of like, huh? Like it's a one of a kind like piece of weird thing. And then so this guy just stabs into this guy numerous times with this trombone, and is just stabbing into him with this trumpet dagger, or trumpet knife, or trombone knife. Trumpet is a different thing. Uh, but I'm just like, you know what? Like, I love the weird goofiness that this movie goes into, even though it's a based on true events thing. That I'm like, did the person actually do any number of these things in the original murders? Like, I guess that killer was really just having some leeways and some odd fun, I guess. Strangely, just I don't know. So we of course have Jamie, who goes and talks to her grandmother because of course Jamie's parents were to die in this car accident, and so Jamie's talking to her grandmother, and her grandmother's like, you know what? With all these events that are technically happening right now, like, I think it's probably best for us to just leave town. Because I don't think that this killer is going to stop until he gets, like, he continues to kill everybody in this town. So, like, let's try to just get out of here. So, Jamie and her grandmother start to leave town, and I'm like, okay, like, this is actually a smart strategy. How many horror films would we go on and just complain? It's like, well, why not just leave the town? Because you'll completely get avoided of death if you're not even in town. So it made all the sense in the world for them to try and leave here. But I would immediately just go on and be like, well, the killer's not going to let them leave town. Like, that, like, is obviously a thing that's going to happen here. And so we had Jamie that was having Nick come over for one last goodbye. And so Nick and Jamie are to get hot and heavy as they kiss and then go on and have some bedroom business, let's just say. As I like to say. Like, there is a contemplation of just calling this YouTube channel at one point Bedroom Business, just because of, like, a lot of people are just like, what the is bedroom business? And I'm like, I don't know either. Like, I just always call bedroom business, like, the doing it part of the movies, when it seems like I have to come up with a very cryptic way to talk about certain things. So, and I don't remember ever if it was actually a legitimate saying, or I've just been coming up with that for so long. And I even Googled it to see if that's an actual thing or a term of phrase that people were to say, and I couldn't find anything. So that's great. So it's something that I probably originally came up with. Whatever. Anyways, like, yeah, give myself a pat on the back for a goofy thing. So Jamie, of course, to have this kind of nightmare where Nick is to be dead, and he's kind of walking off from their bed like he's a zombie into this forest. and then Jamie kind of wakes up to get ready to leave town, and Nick kind of makes his way off to eventually be killed by the Phantom. And here's the one thing about this kill. I couldn't really tell what was going on here. So if I could honestly tell you exactly how Nick died, I would have to just make up something here because I'm not 100% sure how he died. I saw the Phantom kind of swinging something, but heaven forbid I know exactly what that was. I would like to just say that the Phantom was to still weirdly have that trombone just laying around, and so Nick was to be killed by that trombone, just to like consistently have this killer with this weird roster of just weaponry that just doesn't make sense, but he just continues to use it throughout the rest of this film. Because I desperately would love it if we have a slasher killer that just has the weirdest, goofiest freaking arsenal of weaponry. Like, have you guys ever seen the movie Student Bodies? Not the recent horror film Student Body. That's different. There's this one horror film called Student Bodies that, of course, has this killer that breathes really hard through the phone, and he goes on and he kills people with very weird items. Like, he kills them with like an eggplant in part of the film, or he kills them with like safety pins or some goofy thing. Or no, wait, I think he kills them with like paper clips or some goofy thing. And like he kills them through very weird means. And then he goes on, and every time he's like stepping through a person's house, he all of a sudden steps in gum, and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna kill the whoever had the gum. I'm gonna go after them." Yeah, very weird film, but at the end of the day, that movie is freaking hilarious. Check it out if you've never seen it before. I think it's like an hour and 20 some odd minutes, kind of like this film was. Hopefully, I can get there by no longer wasting any more time. So, Jamie goes off with Grandmama to go out of town, telling the deputy force, hey, like, yeah, just so you know, like, me and my grandmother are leaving town. And the deputy's like, okay, like, all right, like, we kind of figured that. It seemed like your grandmother was kind of telling us that you're going to leave town. But we had Jamie also go and meet up with the son's director of the original, the town that dreaded Sundown. And he had some theories about who the killer could quite possibly be. There was this family called the Creedies that was to possibly say that there was a grandson of theirs that was to possibly want to go on and don the persona of the Phantom at some point and go after people. And so, and that's like in the director's son's mind, I guess that could be the next person who is to be donning this sacked head mask and be taking on this persona weirdly. So, as like the director's son is going on and showcasing all of the stuff that he had collected from the original film, and kind of like we have some scenes in this film where they're going and showcasing the, of course, original like pieces of the film, but also showing like some behind the scenes stuff, which I thought was kind of cool. So, man, I really wish that there was just a horror film that would be kind of like this movie making thing that would kind of be very meta, and like all of a sudden we just have it to where it just turn into this kind of horror film, kind of possibly like The Editor, even though that's kind of a goofy film that kind of goes into a much more comedic way about going about things. Like I would like a serious horror film that that kind of has like a horror. Like I love meta stuff, anyways. So you can go on and say like, well, I love like a movie inside of a movie for anything. But I kind of like this where it's like a technical movie inside of a movie kind of thing. But anyways, sorry about all the tangents. Let's go on here. So Jamie goes on and she's trying to leave town. So she goes to some gas station, and by the time that Jamie comes out of the gas station, shots are being fired. We find out that there's some rando guy who's pumping gas who ends up getting killed, and there is to be Jamie's grandmama that gets killed also. And so Jamie is trying to like put pressure on her grandmother's wound, and all of a sudden we have more shots being fired. Jamie's running around her car trying to prevent the bullets from flying into her, and so Jamie is to grab this purse and is to run off like her life depends on it, while the Phantom is kind of chasing after her. Both Jamie and the Phantom are to go into this one building, and all of a sudden we have it where the Phantom is calling Jamie via the cell phone to figure out where she is. So the Phantom is to spot her, chase after her, and so all this is to eventually lead to Jamie going on and not only meeting up with one Phantom, but she ends up meeting up with two Phantoms. And so they corner her and they tell her that she's now going to get killed because she knows the truth. And so we now find out that the last descendant of Creedy, and also Corey, who is to be the first victim of this, is to actually turn around and be the killer also. And we have Jamie who's like, oh my god, like, how is this possible? Like, I saw Corey die. And we have, of course, the other Phantom character being Deputy Foster, who's like, well, did you see him die? Did you? Because Deputy Foster was saying that she had her back turned the whole time while, of course, Foster was killing Corey. And they went on and just found some other dead body that looked a lot like Corey, and they kind of busted, of course, some parts of this guy's teeth. And so Corey had went on to just like eventually just be kind of hiding out for so long. And I'm like, man, this is like really kind of cool, because the guy that I would have normally seen him in, like, I've seen him in Unbreakable and I've seen him in Gladiator, and I usually see him as being these kind of goody two shoes kind of characters, and he was also in Glass. But it's just kind of interesting to see the guy that plays Corey, who is to just kind of be this villain at the end of this story. And I'm like, yeah, it's very rare that you kind of see like a guy that usually plays like the nice guy and whatever, to have him kind of turn around and be the villain at the end of this story. So Corey is to mention that he was to do this because he didn't want to end up just like his dad, that of course went to college and just turned around and just came back into town because there's nothing better for him to do. And so he's like, no, I don't want that. I don't want to break the cycle, and I don't want to be just like my dad. And so I figured that I would go on and be the Phantom instead, to start killing people in this town. So what ends up happening is Foster goes on and is to, of course, kill Corey. And then Jamie is to also have a gun, and so she goes on and shoots Foster. And so Foster goes on and he starts going into this lake or this body of water, and he starts floating off. And so now Jamie, I guess, probably with nowhere else to go currently, is to probably make it to the detectives and kind of tell them all what had happened. And then she goes on to eventually uh, leave town to move elsewhere to continue on with her life, uh, like being out of that town and not being possibly remembered for being a part of this whole new phantom thing. Because evidently there's a lot of people in the town that are saying that the phantom is to be some ghost or some spirit or some demon and that it will never die, like as if this is again like a Friday the 13th kind of movie where, oh, the killer's gonna come back. I hope not. Like, in all respect, in all respect for that town and those people that went through those horrible events. So with that said, I think that's all I want to say for this one. I think I want to just get out of here. I'm sorry for all the tangents and all the stuff that I kind of went about for this film, but I don't know, when I just start talking, just can't stop. So, with that said, as well as just showcasing that here. So, with that said, I think I'm going to get out of here. I feel okay about everything that I technically covered. One thing that I forgot to cover, and I just realized this. So we also had the one officer, because I forgot about a death. We had also the one officer that was going on and finding some girl at this bar, and so this girl ends up giving this officer head. For all of a sudden, we have it to where of course, the Phantom shoots this guy in the head while he's getting some head, and the Phantom breaks into this guy's house and is to go after the woman and chase after her in some field of course, where he can't really find her, but luckily she is to smack into this scarecrow where it looks like the Phantom, so she starts screaming, and so he's like, aha, I figured out where she is. So the Phantom goes on and stabs into this woman and is to hang her in of course, this scarecrow. And so all of a sudden we have the neighbors that are all of a sudden looking out the very next day out at this scarecrow and like, is that an actual woman? And we just kind of see this like recut scene of the original the town that dreaded Sundown, and just kind of showcasing like some behind the scenes. So yeah. So with that said, yeah, hopefully I've covered it technically everything with this movie, because I always usually forget some kind of something. So let me know in the comments below. But I'm gonna get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.